Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session on person-centered planning. Today, our presenters are Dr. Erin Johannes, Liz Ednansky, and I am Rona Segura. I am happy to introduce us all, and I'm going to turn things over to Erin, who is really the brains behind all of this.
Hi, everybody. This is a bit of the overview that we're going to be talking about today in person-centered planning. This is called person-centered planning and why it matters. So we're going to talk a little bit about theory and history. Person-centered planning didn't just kind of spring out of somebody's head and get used because it's a fun thing to do. There's actually a good rationale for doing it. So we're going to talk about that, and then some of the common features that different kinds of person-centered planning have. And then we're going to show you 4 different ways to do person-centered planning. Then it says a little research, but I think I put the research at the front and not the back. And then at the very end, the recording will stop and we will be live and we'll be able to answer any questions. Well, probably not any questions. Actually, Liz will be able to answer any question that you have. So. So we wanted to start by territorial acknowledgement, and I always like to show people this website, and it's also an app that you can get on your phone. It shows you how to do a territorial acknowledgement, but also where all the tribes are in the whole world. It's not quite perfect, but it shows you all the tribes, where their territories were, what languages they spoke, and what the treaties that govern relationships between Canadian government and Indigenous people are. So it's a really fascinating site. You can go there and you can find where you are. I'm residing and a grateful guest in the Kakite Nation, which is the only unlanded territory of a tribe in British Columbia. In the States, there are many tribes that no longer have land. But in Canada and BC, the Kakite people, and there's a lovely film called A Tribe of One. It's also a tribe that had many visitors, and so there's lots of different tribes share acknowledgement here. So the Coast Salish people are who house us. Rona and Liz?
Mm-hmm. And we are grateful to be on the traditional and unceded land of the Semiahmoo First Nation. And this is the land on which we live and we work and we play. So grateful for this space.
Where Liz is staying right now, there's a wonderful park that has all of the different moons, the 13 lunar moons from Indigenous Nation. So this is just a bit about the history and theory of person-centered planning. So Carl Rogers in the 50s was a psychiatrist, and he was looking at different ways to kind of think about supporting people through therapy. And came up with the idea of person-centeredness. And so that began with the concept of unconditional positive regard for people. And so, whereas a lot of different therapeutic means have a bunch of steps, he was like, this is the most important step, is that we appreciate who people are and we're in relationship with them. For folks with disabilities, when we took on this idea about what planning could do, it replaced a bunch of ideas that involved stacks and stacks of papers. I can remember being at big meetings at the institutions where the family would sit on one side if they were even there. The person with a disability wouldn't usually be involved, and there would be a whole table of professionals talking about that person and everything they did wrong, and all of the planning would address those things they did wrong. So then Jack Pierpoint, Marcia Forrest, John O'Brien, and Judith Snow came up with this idea of PATH first. I think MAPS might have been their first tool, and then PATHs was a little bit of evolution. And so it was like a hope-based dreaming tool to help us think backwards about where somebody could be. So instead of going through a list of what was wrong, they started with the idea about what's your dream, and then went backwards. There are some people have said there's thousands of different kinds of person-centered planning. There really aren't. There's about 80 or 100 depending on who you're looking at. But there are all different kinds that have been developed over the last 70 years. This is a funny cartoon that I like that has to do with how people think about how they plan for success. And so what it really looks like is this squiggly line. And so that's what we're trying to focus on, some methods that help us kind of build in capacity to take advantage of the surprises that we run into in life, and to kind of have more of a, abundance. What's common to the person-centered processes, I've just been writing a book about this, so I have to watch that I don't go on and on and on and on. And so what's common to these processes is that they work for the person, right? And so one of the famous meetings that I went to once, the woman came in, saw the social worker, threw herself across the table and grabbed his neck and started choking him because she hated going to those meetings so much. We don't want that. We want people to be really excited to be in these meetings. And so the person is at the center, and they're at the center of their network. So we're not recognizing them as just one person alone, but as a whole network of people coming together in this one person that everyone cares about. There's communication that works for the person. And so we're going to show you some stuff that involves graphics and pixels and different kinds of augmentative communication programs. And that even during the meeting, it activates supports. And so one of the things we often do in PATH is we stop the meeting and we say to the people who are there, what up here makes your heart sing? What would you like to be involved with? And then people will have all these ideas. One of the ones that I really liked was a woman who wanted to travel but didn't have a passport, and she couldn't figure out how to get one because of some complicated factors. And one of the people who was in her team said, I love getting passports. It's my favorite thing. And a year later, they sent me a picture, a selfie, and they were sitting on the beach eating ice cream at Birch Bay because they'd got a passport and they'd gone for ice cream. But
awesome.
I can't imagine anybody who loves getting passports, right? But there are people who like doing all kinds of stuff, and often they're already in our networks and we just need to figure out a way to ask them. So it's all these processes focus on dreaming and what your goals are. They're all appreciative, which means in terms of planning theory, that we focus on what works and what works well, and then we try to find ways to expand and build that. They come out of what's called the social model of disability. And so if you look up models of disability on the internet, you'll see that there's many different models. The model that most institutions used was the medical model, and schools are still basically built on a medical model. This is the social model, which has to do with our relationships. They're often interdisciplinary. Almost always they involve art or something that works for people. I was thinking that there have been person-centered planning events where we've done role playing and improv and even dance. And so we're trying to find a common language with people that in the end leads to an artifact, like a drawing or something that can be distributed to everybody who was present so that we can all stay on the same page. The drawing thing can be important. This was a guy who was in a class that I was teaching, and he was talking to his daughter on the weekend, and they were going to go shopping, and he said, come on, get ready, I've got to make a list. And he said, I will make the list and I will lead the shopping. And so she drew this picture of a grocery basket with all of the things that she had that she thought that they needed. And he said she was totally right. Then they went to the grocery store and they got all of the things on the list. And so it's a really good example, I think, of how often we think people are incapable of doing something, but we just need a new medium to support them. One of the important things is that the opposite of person-centered planning is really to have no plan. And then what happens is we end up with lower expectations of people. And there's a lot of good research on how often the default for folks with disabilities is that we have low expectations, lower than they would like. And it's one of the things when I work with self-advocates that they constantly say, is that people are trying to keep me safe by reducing the possibility of failure, but it actually reduces the possibility of success, right? One of the things that is in my research been really important is the idea of what happens when people are isolated. And so if we can use all of these tools to kind of increase people's networks and increase the possibility of their belonging, all of them lead to increased health outcomes. The opposite, when we keep people isolated and alone, is that there's less aspirations, but also less functioning. Even executive functioning gets reduced by isolation, and people's health gets worse. You know, their blood pumps slower. They tend to get sick more. It takes them longer to recover from those illnesses. They often will die sooner. There's some research that came out of the UK that was like people with disabilities died about 20 years sooner because they were in isolation and lonely. So there's really good reasons to really focus on this idea of helping people build their networks, and person-centered planning is a great way to do that. When PATH was invented, it used to be called PATH, like an acronym, Planning Alternative Tomorrows with Hope. And now it's just, the people who invented that say they don't want more to do with acronyms, and so they're just calling it PATH. Everybody's on a path, and these are some ways to kind of look at what your path is like. This is a bunny rabbit on the path, and when I'm walking, because I think about planning a lot, I always, whenever I see a path, I always think, what would that look like if it was a process? And so this would be, I'm not sure, we'd have to catch the bunny or get past it somehow. Or maybe it would be like, you know, that Monty Python thing, the bunny is actually an attack bunny. I just included this graphic. It was from a presentation that I did that was from a book that at the end of this, there's a link to the chapter that I wrote in the book. And I just like it because it's got a unicorn in it. But what I wanted you to notice was that each of these people has like a series of little faces around it. So when we invite them into planning situations, we're bringing those people in, but they're bringing everybody that they know. They're bringing their networks, and their networks are often going to be the networks that kind of lead us forward. PATH is going to be the first thing that we talk about. Rona and Liz are both trained to facilitate paths and have done them for themselves. And I'm one of the people in British Columbia who can train folks to do paths, and I do that through Spectrum Society probably 3 or 4 times a year with a woman named Ailey. And so this is PATH Classic. There's like 4 or 5 different variations on PATH now. And the one I like to focus on is the classic one because I find it does pretty much everything I ever want it to do. So the first step is that we dream without limits. The second step is to generate a possible future, possible and positive. And so when we're starting a path, we often talk to people about like, this is just going to be an appreciative process. So if you've got problems that you want to bring up, you need to think of a way that's going to be positive to address them. And so we ask them to restate things often. And I can't think of an example now, but Rona, can you think of an example of that? How you would restate something?
What I can think of is, for example, we want to involve more children as opposed to there aren't enough children. So to change it from the language of lack into the future that you want to build.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. And then we talk about what's actually happening right now in somebody's life. And I always say we've got 5 minutes to do this, so just throw out some words to describe what's happening now. And sometimes people will say, I'm really excited about just talking about dreams and possibilities. And sometimes they'll say, right now it's feeling like a disaster. And so we just need to honor that that's how it's feeling and put it up there, and we don't need to deal with it more than that. And then the next section is who, and so that's who is going to be, who is already in the room, but who they're thinking they might want to invite in. So who everybody wants to be there and who to enroll. And then it's next steps. So 5 to 7 memorable things. And so as you walk around, you might carry something in your wallet that just says, these are the 5 things that I'm working on right now in the next month. And then what you're going to do immediately, and it says a month here, but I always get people to agree because often they've already got their month planned, and so we agree on something else. And then breaking down this last part into steps to the future, and we'll show you some examples of how that works. Anything you want to add, Rona?
Oh, I think you're doing great, Aaron.
Liz?
Excellent.
Okay. I was just telling Rona and Liz, this is a guy named Ty from Portland. And when Ty came into the room, I was doing a project for an agency down there on working with 10 different people each year for 3 years on what could happen if they had really excellent planning. And the government said, we've got all these people and it's not working, and so we need a longer range plan. So they brought Ty in, and it was one of the only times in my life where I thought, I don't know what to do here. And so he couldn't stop moving around. He talked a little bit, but it was a lot of repetition of different things. And he really wanted out of that room. But then his family came, and then his friends came, and a bunch of people that he really liked were in the room. And so then he wanted to stay there, but I still didn't imagine how we were going to get from what he was doing to something on the wall that looked at his future. And this picture is my friend Allison, who is a facilitator. And she actually, Allison hired me to do this project down in Portland. And Allison said, we've got this. And she had a big silk umbrella that was divided into different colors. And so she would get everyone in a circle, and then we'd all like twist the umbrella, twist this parachute. And then she'd say, oh, color red. Aaron, tell us about what you've got planned for the next, what are you going to do for recreation in your life? And then I'd say something, and then she'd go, oh, okay, let's do it again. And then wherever it landed, and you can kind of see a picture right under the thing that says dreaming. You can see a picture of people with this parachute. She'd say, oh, Ty, you've got blue. So tell us where you'd like to go for college and your education. And so then he would answer. And so we went through this whole process, and at the end of it, his parents were thrilled. And I went back,
Wow.
I went back about a year later, and I said, I'd really like to use this graphic in this article that I've written. And they were so excited because they said everything that we talked about happened, and all of those people showed up. And Ty is doing great for the first time in his life. So it was a really powerful thing.
Yeah.
That involved everybody. So often people will say, oh, we can't do this with whoever. This is Greta. Greta does not have a disability, except that she's 83. and so she was at a point in her life where she said, I feel like I've been resisting making a new plan for 3 years. And now I'm 83. It's not going to get easier. I need to figure out the rest of my life. And so she had already figured out this very fear-based plan around how she was going to move back to Montreal, go into an assisted living center. She was going to leave her community here, which had been really important to her and which she'd worked for 20 years to create. And she was going to leave all of the things that she was interested in and do this very, very reduced version of her life because she couldn't think of anything else to do. And so she did this path at a class that we were at, and the people facilitating it and who were part of this circle didn't know her at all. They were people who had just met her like 2 hours earlier, and they came up with this really incredible plan. And so I'll just show you. This is what it looked like. She would talk to me almost every day. She would text me or call me and tell me, I just woke up to see my path, and I've done this and this and this, and now I'm working on this. And so she ended up selling her condo, going into a different kind of living, an independent living center, because really, why not? And then she's now making plans to travel and do a bunch of other things, and lately has been working a lot with technology. And so really, yeah, just really getting involved in different ways. This is an app called JotNot Pro, and so you can take a picture like this, and you can clean it up to make it look like this with JotNot Pro. And then that means that you can send it to everyone. So Greta, I think, sent this out to her friends and everybody in her family. I know a couple of her friends talked to me about it. And everybody was very excited about it, because it gives her the opportunity to say what her best life is and then make a plan and live that life. This is Cheryl. And so this was Cheryl's first path. Let's see, I think that the next one, this is Cheryl's second path, and now she's on her fifth path. And she's again one of those people who reports in. Right in the middle there, you can see there's David Weatherow on a laptop. And so this is a thing that we've been doing a lot lately, is inviting people in with technology so that they can be part of it. And David actually showed us how to do this. So we've had as many as 40 people from all over the world in a room doing a path for people. One of the nice things about Cheryl's paths is that she works really hard. Once she's clarified what those goals are, she really commits to them. So she's just moved into a kind of cooperative housing place, and so that's going to be like a permanent home for her. So she's moved out of renting and out of being kind of stuck in these little urban apartments into this very expansive place by the river, and a bunch of new roles. This is an interesting one. The newest way of doing path is to do kind of a scratch pad. And so instead of having a dream section, you do a drawing of somebody's dreams, and then you turn that into an icon. So if you've had like old-timey path training, you probably started with a thing called the North Star, and then a dreaming section. And so this kind of takes the idea of the North Star and the dreaming section and puts it into two. And so for Julie, this is Julie's path. And so that graphic turned into this icon, which was the idea of a beating heart that was all about music. She was very involved in choirs and different kinds of bands, and animals and animal rescue, and her children. And you can see some chickens, and there's a horse. I draw the first horses ever. And so it's like this beating heart of a community that involves animals, children, kids, and music. And then within not very long, she had quit her job, became a musician, bought a farm, had some horses, had lots of animals, and her kids were, I think, living in a different place. So these can really be very transformational for people. This was a path that got done for me, actually, at the end of my master's degree. And so I was graduating. You can see July 2014. That's when I'm going to finish that degree. And so I did. And it wasn't so much that I didn't know what to do, but I wanted to remember how I was going to do those things. And so it's got this Rilke quote on there: "May what I do flow from me like a river, and always be natural the way it is with children." And so that was the important thing, was for me to remember that I'd had this really good experience of actually being who I was in a place where that got respected and appreciated, and I wanted to continue doing that. So Liz, this is Liz's path. And so Liz, do you want to talk a bit about what we did?
Oh, what path was that, Aaron?
This was the one at your apartment building in the common room, and your aunt came from Victoria, and I think your sisters were there, and
yeah, and I think Trish was there too.
I think she was.
Yeah, and my friend Ben.
Yeah, and we had to do it in the corner.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
that was an interesting experience, actually. Watching you draw all that stuff, it was actually a big power thing for me to figure out everything, and I'm still trying to figure out everything, and I'm still working on things on my path, but by digitally on my iPad, because I can't stay there right now because of the I'm just kind of waiting for the pandemic to go down a bit so I can go back to my place. But yeah.
And you had just moved into that place. You'd been living somewhere else, and then you just found
Vancouver, the West End.
And then you found this place in Burnaby, which was a really nice.
And then so that before I moved, I had gotten a job at Batchy with Richard, my friend Richard, and he's like the head boss of Batchy, and it was pretty cool. Like, and then I got resources through that, and then I got to meet other people like you and Shelly and a bunch of other people. Then I started traveling with you and got to know Rona, a bunch of other awesome connections that really got my dreams going.
I can see a few things in here that I'm thinking that we did that would be good to talk about. But one of the things, you'd moved into this place because you were in a bit of a vulnerable situation in your old place.
Yeah.
Right? It was
I won't go into details, but yeah.
Down in the
It
West
was pretty
End,
bad.
right? And so
sorry, go ahead.
this was going to be a much safer place, but your family was also a bit worried about you, right?
Parents will always be worried about their children, even if they're 41.
Yeah. And so a lot of people came to this path because they really wanted to make a better safety plan for you, with you.
Yeah.
Right? And so they had their shoulders up like this, and they were just like waiting to talk about because you kept telling them, you kept telling them you were going out late at night alone and wandering the streets, and you were doing all these things, right?
Well, that was back in the old days, but yeah.
And then they were kind of like really tense because they thought maybe they were going to have to tell you, don't do those things, and you would say, I'm going to do whatever I want.
Well, that's sort of the thing when you have any type of disability. When you move out on your own, you have to be responsible, and I thought I was being safe, but I guess parents say it differently, right? Sometimes.
Remember then I said to you, can you explain to me how you keep yourself safe when you're doing these things? And you talked about you were only going out until a certain period of time, and then you were always home by like 10, and you stayed in lit areas, and you were taking public transit, and you were going with other people if you could, and you had and you could just see like your whole family was just like their shoulders were like dropping down. They're like, oh, okay, she's fine, she's safe and happy, right?
Yeah, well, I felt that way, so.
Yes. Yeah. But you also, so exercises in here, and I know you've been doing that. It says up here in the dream section, it says theater, acting, Shakespeare, musicals, and I'm just going to go to the next slide, okay?
Okay, go ahead.
So here you are on IMDb.
So should I talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
So the movie is called Home Before Dark. If you want to hashtag that, you get to see all the different characters and stuff. They have a book out now that I should actually say, because like I've seen it all over social media, so I know there's a book. Being in this TV series, it was an excellent experience. It was like meeting people I have never met before, and I became friends with them, and it just felt really, really good. And not only that, I had my own hair people, makeup people. I had my own like little box car where I can get my costumes on and get ready and be out the door when it was time. And they were really good with me. Like they really, and every now and then I'd come and fix my makeup or making sure if I'm thirsty or something. And they're just on it. It felt really like living like a store, basically.
Yeah.
Like Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor. Yeah.
But not really her, but Elizabeth Mansky.
So in your last path, you had a Lamborghini and listening to some tunes, or maybe a limo. And then I think you did the limo, didn't you, with Rebecca?
I did.
And then you were thinking, oh, maybe I'd like to try out a little acting. And then you went and auditioned for this part and got it.
Yeah, well, first I remember when I had to go in and I was nervous, like I'm not gonna get it. And then I get a call back and like I was like, jumping up and down, like yay. But
So
yeah.
now you have a different vision, and another vision, and I know that you want to do another path soon, but you've got a new vision of what that could all be like too, right?
There's so many visions, it's kind of hard to stick with the one.
Yeah. And so that's when we go back to that first graphic about how we go from that idea that things need to be a straight line to the idea that they could look like a big ball of tangled wool, to this idea that we could have processes that have capacity to keep us surprised and delighted and interested, right?
Well, I try to keep it interesting, right?
Our texts are interesting?
No, I try to keep things interesting, right?
Try to keep things interesting, yeah. I just wanted to point out this picture down here in the corner on the left is Liz. She told me she was going to go for a walk, and then she texted me a picture of her with a nearly naked guy wearing bunny ears and a tail that she'd met on her walk.
Hey, you never know who you bump into.
Most of us have some idea who we were going to bump into. So Liz, do you want to talk about this? This is, I thought this was interesting. This is one of your old posts that I was looking at the other day. And so you actually facilitated a path for me as part of a training.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You want to talk about it?
Yeah. What do you want me to talk about, though?
Well, you could talk about this, because that was an interesting part.
Well, Aaron was talking about traveling, so I thought, oh, maybe I can add something that's colorful that would be in his repertoire. And so I kind of figured, I kind of had to take a minute, and then I I should do that. So I did it quickly. And
yeah. So Liz was getting trained to be a facilitator, and I was the only person there who hadn't had a path during this training. And so then I said, okay, well, you could do my path, but I'm not really that excited about it because I'm doing something else. And I thought I'll just talk about work. And
no working.
so I start talking about work and what I'm doing at work and what I might like to do and who I work with. And Liz goes, stop. Let's talk about work later if we run out of things to talk about. But let's talk about what's really important to you. What is it you've always wanted to do that you've never been able to do? And I started talking about how I'd been wanting to go traveling for years, and my partner and I wanted to go, but I was in school and we had foster kids and I had all these commitments and we'd never gone. And Liz is like, tell me more, tell me more. What would you do when you were? And so she helped me map out this whole big picture of what I was looking for. And then afterwards, I phoned my best friend and I said, I need to talk to you about this path I just did. And so I took a picture of it and showed it to her. And I said, and she was in the same boat for a bunch of the same reasons. And I said, we've been talking about traveling for like 30 years, and we haven't been.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, okay, let's make that happen. And within, I think it was about 18 months, we were on a cruise ship going to 18 countries, and we went to every art gallery we could go to, and yeah, so I always blame Liz for that trip. And then once we realized how easy it was to go to Europe, I mean, not right now, but I think I went there 4 or 5 more times after.
But look what you did, Aaron. Like, you achieved it, right?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. But you know, if she had kind of gone with yeah, let's just talk about work, you know, so it was a good thing. Rona, are you going to talk about like a bit of the work with groups using these processes?
Yeah, so we've been hearing a lot about how the PATH process can be used to help someone fulfill their dreams as an individual, but the same thing can apply for working with groups. And so what you're seeing on your screen right now is a path that is now further ahead, obviously, than when this was drawn, but a result of a discussion process that we've had with the Merritt School District, where we literally have interviewed hundreds of children, that we've interviewed teachers, support staff, administrators, people in the community, and at each of the schools, and finding what some of the themes are, what some of their appreciations are for the school experience that they're having now, and some of the challenges, and creating a strategic plan for the district using this tool as one of the things that we're that we've incorporated in our toolbox. So it doesn't work just for, or it doesn't need to be limited to individuals. It can be used for groups. I can imagine it being used for families, for couples, as well as for individuals.
Great for wedding planning.
Wonderful for wedding planning, and even better for marriage planning.
Yeah.
You know, we all spend so much time on the wedding and not that much time on the marriage, which is one of my pet peeves, but we won't go there today. And then here we did a path at the Unity Church in New Westminster. I am the minister, and we used this experience to gather people who are not just immediate congregants, but also people in our community and people who know people who go to the church, and embarked on this process where we came up with what are the dreams for the church, what is the dream for the community, and then had a bunch of people, like almost 70 people involved in creating some of the themes, or creating some of the ideas about what they'd like to see. And from there we gathered several themes that came from that, to do with outreach, to do with children, to do with the building, and so on. And then that led to a follow-up meeting with the board, where we then created an action plan. And now you're seeing where August 2019 and December 2019 are empty on this slide. Those have since been filled in as we've done as we've moved along in the path. And one of the things that's been really nice about that is, as you've seen, these are big visuals. It's a 4x8 sheet of paper, which lots of color, that we have in our fellowship hall. And so people can look at it all the time pre-COVID, I grant you, but to be able to look at it and to know that these things are all on the radar, and then they can see as things get filled in and so on. So it's been a fun experience to know that we've got things moving in a direction. Now, post-COVID, it will probably be time to revisit that and do another one. And that's one of the things about a path, is that squiggly line that Aaron showed sometimes will end up necessitating a completely different path down the way. And for sure our lives have changed now. So we'll be doing that again as we move to sometime in the future, a post-COVID environment, but for now, an online environment as we're doing with this presentation today.
Thanks, Rona. So, so that's it for paths, and we've spent quite a bit of time, but part of that is because they're really the exemplary way of doing person-centered planning, I always think. And so once we've kind of got a grip on them, we can look at some of the other ways. A really simple way is using circles. And so there's one of these, if you've got the package, the mail out package, you have a copy of this at the end. And so here are the ways, these four kind of gradations of relationship, moving from intimacy, so who I'm closest with, and so then I talk to people about, you know, if you were in the hospital, who could help you, who could see you naked, and then people who are friends, so people you could call when you need for some help. Participation, people you might do yoga with, or sometimes that you work with who are not yet friends, or maybe you don't want to be friends with them. You're just in the same place at the same time doing the same thing. These things change a lot with COVID, but they don't go away. Like so many of the things that are coming up with the pandemic, it's not necessarily a change as a sort of a deeper awareness of something that we already knew. And so it's interesting stuff to think about. And then economic exchange. This is a list of the ways that we can use these things. Teachers often use them with kids to talk about vulnerability issues around child abuse. And so, you know, teaching kids to be assertive around that stuff. You can have those kind of conversations. Also with adults with disabilities is a way to talk about sexuality and stuff. And I always think assertiveness is probably the most important thing that
Definitely.
that we have to teach people. Really good things to use when people are transitioning from something to something else. There's some research around how few of the connections that we work so hard to help kids create when they're in high school, how few of those connections continue after a couple of years. And so when I'm working with high school students, I often get them to, we put down all the names, but we also have like people's phone numbers, their parents' phone number, their email addresses. We talk to them about like, are you friends on Facebook yet? So taking advantage to do that. And so just as a way of looking at expanding networks, I get people to do this in workshops. I get parents to do this for their kids and with their kids, and then I get parents to do it with themselves. And Rona, Liz, and I did a workshop last year at this conference that was about using circles and getting people to think about this, because parents need as many relationships as kids. Liz, you want to say anything about that workshop?
Doing the graphics was a lot of fun for that.
Yeah, we made little puppets and moved them around, right?
Yeah.
So
it was like Mr. Dress Up, but not really. More like Mr. Rogers, I mean. Excuse me.
I think I demonstrated how Angela was in my economic exchange and then became one of my best friends.
Aw.
Rona? Any?
Yeah, I'm reminded of one of the participants who was in a state of shock and awe as they realized how their lives had changed, and how they had limited the number of friendships and hadn't put enough energy, or hadn't allowed themselves to put energy into developing personal friendships for themselves as much. And so their lives centered around their child who had a disability. And as a result, they were not recognizing how depleted and how isolated they themselves were.
Yeah. I wish that, actually, I wish Gary and I had done this a few years after we adopted our son, and looked around and said, hey, we have nobody in our lives anymore. And then had to start working on it. It would have been good to do that in a more kind of organized way. Um, and so let's see. This is just an example of one of the ways that I think we can use this kind of tool. So my daughter Amanda has autism, and she made it through school, and that was great. We were really proud of her. And then she went off to her first day of grade 12, and she was so excited this was going to be her graduating year. And then she came home and she had this big pile of papers, and we were thinking, oh yeah, paperwork, we know how to do that, because we do. We're good at paperwork. And it was all stuff about different places you could buy a prom dress, and when the prom was going to be, and where you could get your pictures taken, and how you know, all of these services. There was a prom fair coming up, and she wanted to go to it, and we didn't know anything about going to proms. Neither my partner or myself had even gone to the prom, and we didn't know anything about that stuff, and we certainly didn't know anything about prom dresses. Wasn't quite as challenging as the Brazier episode, but it was like, we don't know what to do. So we sat down and we looked at who was in our circles. And sorry, this is fuzzy, you're not able to see it, but I looked at like who I worked with. Gary looked at who was in his family. We looked at who was in the school. There were some other kids that we knew at the school who would also be going to prom. And so we thought maybe we could ask them what to do. And then we made a list with Amanda about how to work that. And people had ideas that she didn't like. One of the ideas was there was a charity group that would give you a prom dress, but you didn't get to have any input into what prom dress it was. And she nixed that. She wanted to pick her own dress and pay for, and then it turned out she wanted to pay for the dress. And we were like, that's okay, we can pay for the dress. And she said, I am buying my own prom dress. The other thing that happened was we phoned the school and we said, so Amanda's talking about going to the prom. And they said, yeah, we have a special prom for special people. And so I said to Amanda, oh, you don't need to worry about it. They have a special prom. They said it's less stressful. And she said, I'm going to the prom. I'm going to the real prom. And we're like, okay. And so all these friends showed up, and they all had different things to offer. And I thought one of the most interesting ones was a friend of a friend who was an accountant, who kind of showed up and said, you're going to need a budget, honey. And so she sat her down, and they made a budget to save money for a dress, which led to a business plan to make cupcakes and sell cupcakes as a way to do that, which then actually led to a job. So the whole thing had all of these more, bigger implications than it would have had if we'd been more in control of it. And so there's Amanda at her prom. And this story is included in a presentation called Renegotiating Reciprocity. And at the end of this presentation, there's a bunch of links, and that's one of the links. It's on SlideShare. We've also used the circles tool with groups. And so this was a group of self-advocates in Nanoose Bay, thinking about how they could have more participation and more inclusion in their community. And so the things they were already doing and who they were connected with. And then this was the first part of the graphic. And the second part was just generating lists and lists and lists of names of who they knew and who those people knew, so that they could get more leverage in their community. So our second last, that was the second, this is the third. Our second last tool is called one-page profiles. And these are, you'll sometimes see them in schools and in groups. There's a ministry, CLBC office, where they have these on the doors of all of the people who work there. There's a school that I work at that has these for all of the kids, and they use them if somebody's new in the room. They can say who the kids are really quickly. And it essentially gives you some really basic information on one page. If you go to this site, I think this must have been a grant these people got, but there's a couple of hundred of different templates that you can look at. And then you can download the one that works for you. and it comes up as a Word document, and then you can just put things in the Word document that answer the questions, how you want to be supported, what people like and admire about you, what makes you happy, a picture of yourself. It's all very simple, but really effective ways to get people talking about who they are. Our last tool, this is on Facebook, I was telling people this was going to be the surprise, but the truth was that I couldn't remember what it was. So the Presence to Contribution tool comes out of Helen Sanderson's work. She created this beautiful drawing with Grove Consulting, who do these things. And I think it's quite self-evident. In the top, you put all the activities that you can think of that you or somebody is engaged in. And then you look at the places where you're just being present and how you could have presence, how you could be more actively participating, how you could be connecting more, and how you could be contributing. And so this example has somebody going to college and the different ways in which they could move from being present to contributing. This is a friend of ours we were talking about before, Liz. It's somebody that joined a church, and I went with her, and then, you know, when we first started going, it was a little hard to be included in the congregation, and so it's been interesting for us to kind of figure out that and how we do that, and then at one of the recent meetings, we had people kept saying, I wonder what she would think, what her name would think of this. And I was like, oh, it's so cool that they're thinking of her as sort of an example of somebody, example of the congregation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've gone from, you know, barely there to being right at the front of everyone's minds. And, but that's been a quite conscious process, I think, so. Last but not least, I just wanted to talk a little bit about planning and Indigenous people. And so the Art Brain project is a project that Liz and I have been involved with for the last year. We're on phase 2, which is called Cedar Summer. We just got a little bit of funding to go through the summer with people, mostly online, but some in person. And we had my Indigenous friend, Priscilla, come in, and she worked with people, talking to them about cedar trees and ceremony and things like that. And so she smudged everyone, and we had a great time.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say, Liz?
It was a really interesting experience. I remember when they smudged me, I had a very sore hip that day, so I asked if she could do it on my hip, and by the end of the day, my hip felt really good.
Wow, that's amazing.
Like, I can, whenever I get something like that done, or if I go into a crystal place and pick up like those rocks and stuff, my skin can really feel the power of that spiritualness.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's one of the things about Indigenous culture is it's holistic, right? So always operating on all those levels. And
yeah.
So on the right here is an article by Katrina Pepe, and this is from Australia about Wano. Is a huge idea about family and community that I can't possibly explain. Sorry, she's New Zealand, not Australia. But it's how they use path there with people and groups and families and communities. And there's a link at the end. We've also been in our work with the school district. Right from the beginning, we were really concerned to bring in cultural awareness. It's a region with 7 different Indigenous tribes, and that was really exciting to us. And so you can see here, there's a picture of smudging, and the kids were really liking this, and it was making it really easy for them to respond to questions. When we get into person-centered planning as kind of a central way to be with people, it really changes the role of staff, right? So the role of staff, which used to be kind of to take care of people, becomes to facilitate people to be able to say what it is they want, and then help them make the
Mhm.
connections that make those true. And this picture of a mermaid, this is by Avril Orloff, who's a graphic recorder. And I love this picture because it was a group of people who were talking about what they value in staff. and you'd think whatever you'd think, but the thing that came up as the thing they most valued was the creativity. So creative responses to challenges, right? And so how to help people be connected and how to keep them kind of moving forward. The nice thing about these tools is that as staff learn how to use them, they do them for themselves as well. And so Jean Clark has this quote that my friend David Petoniak uses all the time: a person's needs are best met by people whose needs are met. And so the more we can help people figure out what it is they need in their life and get those things, the more likely those people are going to be good supporters.
Mhm.
The other thing that happens is that as soon as people start saying what it is they want, agency leaders start listening to those things, because often it's only because of a lack of clarity that people don't have the things that they're hoping for. This was some work we did around the province, but this particular meeting was in Victoria. And so it has to do with the gifts that people bring and how they wanted to be supported to use those gifts. Okay, I'm going to go into just the info about how to get in contact. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Rona or Liz?
I think that was great, Erin.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So this is the website that we're all on, this website, so you can get in contact with any of us. I think everybody's information is there, and we also do training a few times a year, and we do training around the province in different ways. The BC Family Support Institute did a project a couple of years ago where they trained PATH facilitators. A bunch of people who were involved in that project are now looking at how to do PATHs virtually. And so if you were interested, you can contact BC Family Support Institute, and they'll try and connect you with somebody who knows these tools. We're going to have questions when this stops. We will be live online. Maybe we're even there already. Maybe we're in two places at the same time, Liz.
Time change.
We
need a DeLorean.
we might be watching this with them, and then we'll be there answering questions.
Yeah.
This was a great session where Liz was really pleased to see that I'd had this drawing of Mr. Rogers, and so she was riffing off that and did this gorgeous drawing on the left, and everybody was so excited about it, and led to some great conversations, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh
Definitely.
yeah. There's a bunch of resources. There's a bunch of resources here. And so there's a copy of the circles. And so if you want to do that, you can do it. Inclusion.com has most of the world's collection and production of books, videos, resources, and training around person-centered planning. Imagine a Circle is my site, and folks are on it. And there's a bunch of articles. I've been putting up articles lately about person-centered planning. This is a link to a chapter that is in a book called Sense Making Through Arts-Infused Person-Centered Planning Processes, and my chapter is about PATH and person-centered planning. That's where you can read more about Ty and some other folks. On SlideShare, there's a presentation about renegotiating reciprocity that I gave for a conference in Winnipeg. And it has the whole story about Amanda and the graduation prom dress. This is a link to the article on PATH and Aboriginal people, and the last one is where all the one-page profiles reside. And that's that. And I guess now we'll all say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Liz, I want to see what you're drawing.
Okay, I'll send it to you guys.
Well, can you hold it up?
A big T.
Everybody can see?
I could try here. Hold on.
Is it your iPad? Okay, bring
Come closer.
bring it. Yeah. Oh, nice.
That looks really cool.
I do look like Brad Pitt. And is that
Definitely instead.
Rhoda or Angelina Jolie? Are they back together?
I want to see that.
Okay, so Liz is gonna send us that graphic. We'll turn it into a PDF and we'll include it with everything so that you'll see it. And now we're gonna be there live and answer any questions that you have. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.